The AI arms race and this developing story around NVIDIA. Christina Partsenevelos joining us now with the very latest. Christina?
Scott, I can confirm the U.S. Commerce Department has given NVIDIA the green light to sell its H200 chips to China, although NVIDIA right now is not commenting. Shares were up about 2.5%, like you pointed to, but only up 1% now. And that's because investors are cautious about just celebrating too early. This is seen as a compromise. And I say compromise because now the U.S. government is offering chips from 2023 rather than newer Blackwell technology. Both NVIDIA, keep in mind, and AMD also agreed to pay a 15% fee on China sales back in August, though it's still very unclear if that's actually been implemented. But Washington's approval is only half the battle. Chinese media is calling this desperation, arguing the U.S. is easing restrictions because NVIDIA is losing its foothold as domestic alternatives surge. They're labeling the H200 a, quote, sugar-coated bullet with the same backdoor security concerns that led China to shun the H20 chip. China has been pouring billions of dollars into their domestic market. Bernstein, just in a note on December 4th, expects China's local AI chip supply to grow 5 times larger by 2028. So Washington may have said yes, but China could still say no. And that's the real test for whether this actually translates into revenue, Scott.
All right, that's well laid out for us. Christina, thank you. Christina Partsenevelos for more. We are joined now by Wedbush star analyst Dan Ives. It's good to have you here.
Great to be here.
How significant is this?
It's a watershed moment if it plays out, and I believe it will. Look, I mean, our whole view is you don't want to give Huawei and China Tech more power. By taking NVIDIA out of that market, that's what they've done. And what that, you're talking about what could be 15, 20 billion a year. And I think this shows, and we've seen it being in DC a bunch the last few months. I mean, you're seeing changing winds there. I mean, there's a recognition that you have to give NVIDIA that market. You have to let that open because otherwise China tech gets an advantage. And for the first time in 30 years, U.S. tech is ahead of China.
Well, first of all, you call it a watershed moment. The stock's up 1%. I mean, really? Watershed? Yeah. Stock's up 1%. If it was such a watershed moment, wouldn't the stock be up more than 1%?
No, I mean, look, I view it as we go into the coming weeks, we're going to look at this as more and more China opens up. Even as Trump's going to do the visit there in April, I think this is more the tea leaves because I view it, this is just the start of what's going to be an opening of that relationship. And I expect more and more. NVIDIA is going to be able to sell into that market. And that's not baked in. I mean, if you start to think about from a street perspective, the view is China very, very cautious. I'd say negative in terms of what that's going to ultimately be. I'd say the street's underreacting to what I believe is really going to be an opening up of what's going to be a golden opportunity for NVIDIA.
Christina laid it out, though. It's China could very well be like, thanks, but no thanks. I mean, the market seems like it's not willing to take a big leap forward because there are many things that are still at play. Yeah, not to mention the fact that these are, already like 18-month-old outdated chips from the highest quality ones that NVIDIA produces anyway.
And still, I think, 1 to 2 years ahead of where Huawei is. So in my view, just being in Asia for 3 weeks, you go to any China big tech company, whatever they say publicly, at the end of the day, they want NVIDIA chips. There's only one chip fueling the AI revolution. I think this just signifies cool relations, and I think obviously a lot more positive between U.S. and China. That's bullish for big tech. It's bullish for you. It's bullish for AMD and others.
Okay, so do you think you're giving enough credit to the TPUs versus the GPUs of NVIDIA and the apparent advancements that Alphabet has made in this arms race battle, whatever you want to call it, with NVIDIA?
Yeah, I mean, we've said 400's bull case because not just because of TPUs, but we sense a major change that's happening at Google. I mean, you see, they're on the offensive side versus defensive. Ever since the DOJ win, I think now they're going to be in a situation where Apple is going to be a big deal that they're going to get done in terms on the AI front. And I think what you're starting to see now is NVIDIA demand the supply is 12 to 1. So when it comes to Meta and some of the TPU that we saw, there's not enough chips to go around yet. So when I look at...
When does the yet become a problem for NVIDIA?
I think that's not till late next year, maybe early 2027 in terms of the yet being a problem. And that's why, to me, when I look at Alphabet, I mean, me and you have talked about that for a long time. You go to the beginning of this year, I mean, New York City cab driver was bearish on that name. It's had a huge prove me. And I'd say a similar thing, maybe even where I say Apple is, right? I mean, Apple all-time high, but I think investors are not giving it the credit to now the AI revolution as that comes on the consumer side, and they inked that deal with Alphabet, and that's going to be a game changer.
What's up with Apple?
Some breaking news on NVIDIA. Eamon Jabbers has the story. Eamon?
John, that's right. We've got a new social media post from the president on NVIDIA. The president saying on social media just moments ago, I have informed President Xi of China that the United States will allow NVIDIA to ship its H200 products to approved customers in China and other countries under conditions that allow for continued strong national security. President Xi responded positively. 25% will be paid to the United States of America, the president says. He goes on to say in a very lengthy post that this approach will also apply to AMD, Intel, and other American companies. So the president's suggesting here that the U.S. government is going to take 25% tax effectively on chip sales to China from NVIDIA in this category. And then also he says he's going to apply that approach to other American companies. So maybe a cost of doing business here for NVIDIA. There's a lot of questions around this, John, of whether China needs this category of chip. The president says this deal will not apply to the Blackwell and Rubin categories, but it will apply to the H200s. John, back over to you.
All right. Eamon, thank you. Kind of an inverse tariff, it sounds like. Eunice, is this likely to be received in China? Is it a sign that President Trump's strategy is working, a sign that China's strategy is working?
I think that the Chinese companies are going to be very pleased. But from my conversations with various tech companies that are using these chips, that there is a computing power disadvantage. Right. So what they've been doing because of all the politics is there are a lot that want to use NVIDIA chips, but they're also diversifying and they're using Huawei chips. But there's friction between a lot of Chinese companies and Huawei. They don't want to be too dependent on Huawei either. So they're looking to diversify their tech stacks. And a lot of people that I speak to there say that because the government has been giving them a lot of breaks on energy, they've been able to not very efficiently still use a lot of these Chinese chips.
We'll see if this move will help American technology crowd out the Chinese technology. I guess that's the effort. Eunice, great to see you. If you have a strong NVIDIA position, can you add to it at this point, or you just pat yourself on the back?
I think you should wait because NVIDIA is so tied in with OpenAI, Oracle. I mean, we've talked about the circularity. Today, you had the news that potentially they could be selling more to China. Stock's done really well. You've got some competition on its heels with Google and other chip companies. I think you wait, you might get a better chance just with the overall market, but I wouldn't add to it at these levels.
Does NVIDIA trade against Broadcom more these days, or are they all both part of the same AI trade? Is Broadcom likely to do anything that affects NVIDIA, or does it tend to be the other way around?
I think they all trade along the same way. I mean, it's all pushing towards, the North Star. And as demand increases, I think that's what you're looking for. The big fear here, John, is there going to be too much supply? Or do one of the hyperscalers cut back? And if that's going to happen, it's going to affect almost everybody.
Meantime, shares of NVIDIA and AMD jumping after hours, the president confirming that he has told China's President Xi Jinping that NVIDIA will be allowed to sell its H200 chips to China. The approach will apply to other companies as well. Let's bring in Eamon Jabbers for the very latest on this story. Eamon.
Melissa, the news here is we now have a statement from NVIDIA reacting to the president's announcement on social media a short time ago. Here's what NVIDIA has to say about it. They say, we applaud President Trump's decision to allow America's chip industry to compete to support high-paying jobs and manufacturing in America, offering H200 to approved commercial customers, vetted by the Department of Commerce, strikes a thoughtful balance that is great for America. Now, NVIDIA not mentioning in that statement, Melissa, the news out of the president's statement, which was that the United States government is going to take 25% of this transaction. Take a look at the president's social media post from a short time ago. And what you see is he says, I've informed President Xi of China that the United States will allow NVIDIA to ship its H200 products to approved customers in China and other countries. The president goes on to say that that's going to happen under conditions that allow for continued strong national security. President Xi responded positively. 25% will be paid to the United States of America. The president also goes on to say in that lengthy post that this approach will apply to other companies as well. So I've just sent a text to a White House official to try to understand the White House's legal basis for asserting what is effectively a tax on NVIDIA, that they're going to have to pay 25% of the revenue from this transaction to the U.S. government, and try to understand a little bit about how that will work and how it will be applied to some of these other companies. But this is a striking deal for NVIDIA and a striking change, I guess you could say, in the way the United States approaches U.S. companies that are doing business overseas. If they need any kind of approval or license, we've seen the U.S. take equity stakes, and now we're seeing the U.S. take a revenue piece.
So selling the H200 before was a national security problem, but now it's not, and the U.S. government gets 25% of sales.
Exactly. And now the president said here in the statement that it's to certain customers in China, that there are going to be national security protections vetted by the Department of Commerce, and that other higher level chips will not be part of this deal, notably the Blackwell. But that's the deal. You pay 25%, you get your transaction.
Eamon, thank you. Eamon Javers from the White House. Of course, it is worth noting that the H200 chip is about 18 months or so behind the most advanced chips. So there is a question as to whether or not Chinese customers will actually want this chip in a robust fashion, because some of the competitors domestically may offer a chip that is more advanced. But still, this is a very interesting dynamic, given there is no China in any of NVIDIA's forecasts.
And it opens the door for, I mean, this is a door opening for future sales of other chips, I think, which is, I think, why you're seeing the pop. I don't know how you get a 25% chop on it. I don't know how that structures out, but, you know, I mean, the world we live in, I guess anything's possible. We'll see if this rally in NVIDIA lasts. Obviously, I think a lot of people have been hoping for this for a while.
It's a great question how they can have this 25%. I don't know if I'm joking or not, but I think they should just continue to sell through Saudi Arabia, and then which ultimately some of which end up in China anyway, or Singapore, or whatever the route is. I don't know exactly.
25%.
Yeah, it does save them 25%. It's I mean, they did have originally that 15% agreement, which ended up never going anywhere because they stopped selling. Right. This is unusual, but okay, it's an unusual time.
Yeah, and I think, this is really going to open up an entire market for them, which we just haven't been pricing in at this point. There's starting to be a lot of questions of other companies here domestically who are using TPUs, they're using in-house chips. So will this offset that? Probably. The demand in China and the outlook there, we'll see how much they can sell. They know it's only to certain companies, so I don't know how big that market is, but I think it's opening the door to that, and that's what people are optimistic about.
I think this is better news for AMD. I think this is better news, and I'm long AMD, but I'm long NVIDIA too. I just think, the MI400 now suddenly can compete with a chip that's 18 months old. On this, call this reverse tariff. I think it's interesting. It's one day. It's a couple hours. It's an announcement. We've kind of gotten the sense that this was happening. I feel like we've heard both parts of this. If the two parts are, yes, you go to China on this chip, and yes, there will be some kind of a slice,
revenue sharing,
a chop.
Well, that's what you call it. You get a chop.
Wouldn't that happen to AMD also? Why would AMD get to do it?
But AMD has more to gain. AMD just has more to gain to be in this game. But what's interesting, again, we're only minutes into this, and even though we've heard, but wouldn't you have thought you'd had a much bigger move in NVIDIA on this if suddenly access to China was wide open? I do, and I think we've struggled at these levels.